Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode of inspirED. I'm Sarah Loudon from Total Health Conferencing, and tonight I'm joined by Dr. Shikha Jain, and we will be talking about work-life balance, among other things. Dr. Jain, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks so much for having me.
So I normally don't do a really intensive introduction, but as I was going through your bio, I thought it really would do the audience a disservice if I didn't set up who you are in the context of what we're going to be talking about, because it is not just impressive, but it is really the definition of inspiring. So if you'll permit me a moment, I'm going to start with Dr. Jain was named one of modern healthcare's top 25 emerging leaders in 2019 and was also awarded the Rising Star Award by the Lead Oncology Conference and nominated in 2020 as Women Leader in Oncology. She was selected as a Research Hers Ambassador by the American Cancer Society and was honored by 500 Women in Medicine. She was appointed to the 2020 ASCO Women's Networking Center Task Force, the 2021 ASCO Diversity and Inclusivity Task Force, and appointed to the Council on Communications and Membership Advocacy and the COVID-19 Task Force for the Illinois State Medical Society. She's founder and COO of the COVID-19 Action and Advocacy Group Impact and founder and chair of the Women in Medicine Summit. She founded and co-chaired the inaugural Women in Medicine Symposium at Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago in 2018 and focused on promoting the advancement of women physicians at Northwestern. She's the co-founder of the Rush Center for the Advancement of Women in Healthcare, board certified in hematology and oncology, assistant professor of medicine in the Division of Hematology, Oncology, and Cell Therapy at the University of Illinois, and the Director of Communication Strategies in Medicine and the Associate Director of Oncology Communication and Digital Innovation. I also want to say she's the mom of 3 kids. And so hearing your introduction from your bio and knowing that you've got 3 kids all under the age of 7, you are the epitome of work-life balance. And I'm so honored to have you here because I feel like we're getting ready to hear really important and impactful bites of wisdom from someone who is living what you are teaching us tonight. So I would love to start with just kind of framing the conversation to say, a lot of our audience are physicians or in the healthcare field, but a lot are just lay people, advocates, patients, other people that are looking for quality content during this crazy time of COVID. So I'm going to kind of ask this question 2 ways. Do you think it's possible for women physicians, women in healthcare, and really women who are just climbing a corporate ladder, especially with young kids, to have it all? If so, tell me your philosophy.
So first of all, thank you so much for having me here today. I think that when it comes to talking about having it all, it really depends on what you mean, because that means different things for different people. You mentioned that I am the epitome of work-life balance. I can assure you I am not. And my family would tend to agree with me. I think the challenge is really trying to figure out and prioritize what's important to you, and then figuring out how to achieve that in the best way where you are sacrificing something, but not sacrificing something that is incredibly important to you. So for me, I am really lucky in that I have a incredibly supportive family. I have a husband who's also a physician, but is very supportive of everything that I want to do and I want to accomplish. I have parents who are able to help with the children, and granted during COVID, things have kind of been out of whack. But we have 4 grandparents who are all very interested in helping with the kids and are very supportive of both me and my husband's careers. So I think for me, the way that I've been able to achieve some semblance of balance, if you want to call it that, is by having a really strong support system. That being said, there are many days, most days actually, where I feel like I'm failing at some aspect of my life, whether it's family or work or social. There was an entire year where I don't feel like I connected with a lot of my friends because I was just so busy with really young kids. I have twins, and when they were first born, I was just disconnected from everyone, and I was still trying to, survive at that point in my career and not flounder. And so I think that there is a lot to be said for having a strong support system, whether it's friends or family. But I think that it really is about what you think is important. And a lot of times I rely on my family to help me reset. And if I'm getting too over committed, or if I'm getting to a point where I'm doing too much, they are very good at real talk and sitting me down and saying, all right, so here's the deal. We're missing you here, here, and here. Or do you feel like you're overstretched, or you've been a little bit more irritable than usual? Do you think maybe you need to cut back on some of the things you're doing? So having those conversations with me, they're not always easy conversations to have, but I think they're part of the reason that I've been able to do as much as I have, because they keep me honest, so to speak. They make sure that I'm really being introspective as much as I can and reevaluating and modifying on a daily basis as to what my priorities are.
I had a podcast with Dr. Shane McCasman from Cancer Treatment Centers of America on physician burnout. And so much of what she was talking about in terms of, classifying, categorizing burnout, and like looking for the risk factors and symptoms and things, all rooted in the absence of being able to have that, not necessarily support structure of the number of people, but support structure in realizing life when you are a really driven person, when you are someone that's kind of looking for balance of things. It starts with inventorying what your life looks like and what you want it to look like. And as you were talking, it was really great to hear that, people outside of you can sit down knowing your goals and say, let's reset, let's kind of look and see if you're on the path that you're setting out to kind of complete. So I think that it kind of marries that concept of work-life balance. Without the inventory system, you can burn out quickly. And reading your intro, this is just in the last couple of years, never mind everything you've done before this, but it would seem that in order to accomplish this level of impact, really required having that, transparency and balance in life. Shikha, do you think that there's guilt around being a mom and kind of setting priorities that are outside what all being a mom encompasses?
100%. And I think part of it is external and part of it is internal. We expect certain things from ourselves. My mom is amazing, and I always imagined I would be the kind of mom that my mom is. I am not 1/100th of the mom that my mom is, and I feel that intensely. My mom is amazing, and she still today helps me with things. So when my 6-year-old is crying because she doesn't want me to go back to work, or she's worried about me going in because she knows I'm going to be wearing an N95 and COVID is happening, I think that mom guilt exists. I think parent guilt exists. My twins are 2, and I wish that I could freeze them at this stage because they're changing so much on a daily basis. And so when I go to work, I feel bad that I'm leaving them and I'm missing out on things. But I also think it makes me a better mom to be able to go and come back, because I appreciate the quality of time that I have with them. It forces me to put my phone down, although not as often as I should. It forces me to really be in the moment. And again, I often get sidetracked, and my husband has to remind me, hey, put your phone down, you're home, you're not working right now. So I think that guilt is definitely there. I think for physicians, especially throughout this pandemic, there's a whole different level of guilt that has encroached into our lives, where we're now also worried about exposing our friends and family to coronavirus. So, you know, my husband and I have a decontamination routine that we do when we come home. So I think that guilt is there. There's different types of guilt. There's guilt that you're not being a good enough parent. There's guilt that you're not doing enough at work. And now there's this guilt of potentially exposing your family to COVID-19. So I think guilt exists. How you deal with it and manage it, I think, is really a reflection of how you're constantly trying to improve upon yourself, which is something I strive for. And again, I don't succeed on most days, but I think, you know, one thing I tell my 6-year-old is every day is a chance to be better than you were the day before. And so we just try to do better the next day. And, you know, everybody makes mistakes, and you have to give yourself a little bit of grace and cut yourself some slack, especially as we navigate this crazy time.
Yeah. You know, I in another interview, someone had mentioned doing something like a daily practice of, you know, the rose and the thorn, or the pit and the peak, with their kids, where you really look and say, you know, what did I do great today? What could I have done better? And so it's this, like, you know, release of whatever that was, both in gratitude for what was great and in almost like forgiveness for what you could have done better. But it's this spoken reminder to do with them, in terms of letting them see that life really is a series of decisions, and growing to make better decisions, you know, one by one. So as you were talking about that, I was thinking we really have to think about developing the next generation. Because I know when I think about my parents, I don't know how they did the things that they did. And I kind of wish I knew, so that I wasn't navigating, you know, through my stuff without lessons like that. Do you think that there is opportunity, especially now that COVID's kind of brought us closer together in longer times, to spend this time kind of imparting on your kids what maybe we didn't have growing up?
I think so. I mean, I do a similar rose and thorn thing with my daughter, but I try to pose it in kind of a positive way. So I say, tell me one good thing you did today, or one thing you did to help someone else, and then tell me one thing you're going to do better tomorrow. And so that way it's kind of framed in a positive, where you did something good, but I also want her to remember she's not perfect. She didn't do everything great. So what's something that you can be better at tomorrow? I think that, you know, I have gone to my parents for guidance throughout my life, you know, on professional, personal, parenting. They've been kind of my North Stars for a lot of what I do. So I feel very fortunate. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, but she also helped run my dad is a surgeon. And so she helped with his initial practice, and then she helped my brother with one of his businesses. So she did work outside the home as well, but she had the flexibility of being there, you know, for me. And we have a nanny, we have babysitters, we have a very different way of living. These days, I think there's a lot more dual working families. And so it's just navigating different challenges. My parents say to me all the time that seeing what me and my husband go through as two working parents, they're always so impressed with how parents are able to navigate, especially in this day and age. I mean, when my parents were raising me, social media wasn't a thing. There wasn't all this exposure. My parents were able to protect me a lot more back then than I think we're able to protect our kids now. So I think they're also learning as grandparents. They're learning how to navigate this new world that we live in, and helping guide me, utilizing the skills that they used to raise me and my brother when we were kids, but now applying them to these new challenges that we face as we enter a very, you know, social media heavy world.
Yeah. You know, you're such an ambassador for using social media constructively to communicate, to network, to inform, to empower. How do you balance that? Because I know I wake up in the morning and I literally get on my phone. I mean, as my eyes open, I'm on my phone. And then throughout the day with work, it's like, so almost like my downtime. I'm scrolling through Twitter. And even though it's constructive in a lot of ways, that I'm consuming really positive things and getting access to be able to, you know, read through things that maybe I wouldn't ordinarily have even known existed, I struggle so much with how much time I'm on social media. Maybe you can talk about that, especially as you've been appointed Associate Director for Oncology Communication and Digital Innovation. It's like, it's now part of your job to be on social media. So maybe talk a little bit about balancing that.
So I will tell you, I've gone through ebbs and flows. A couple months ago, especially in the middle of this pandemic, I was on social media far too much. I was becoming obsessed and I didn't even realize it. You get a dopamine surge when someone likes a post. You get constant information. I wanted to know what was happening in the minute that it was happening. And I didn't realize I was becoming pretty much obsessed. So my family actually said to me, they said, we don't like spending time with you right now. You are on your phone too much. You need to stop. And it was a wake up call to me because I hadn't even realized I was doing something differently. So my husband and I have a box in the front of the house that we try when we come home to put our phones in it. If we're on call, we leave the ringer on. I try very hard. I sometimes just plug my phone in to charge so that when I'm home, I'm present. It's something I still struggle with because it is very easy to just kind of, your kids going to the bathroom. Okay, let's scroll through my phone. Oh, your kids, taking extra time to put on their shoes. Okay, scroll through my phone. It's a very hard habit to break, and I am still working on it. I know a lot of people set limits on their phone where you can lock yourself out of an app after you've been on it for a certain amount of time. There are some people who set specific times of the day where they are only using social media for this 30-minute time block. So there's a lot of different strategies that you can use to limit the way that you're utilizing social media. I think for me, I'm lucky because I have people who tell me, hey, put your phone down. But there's a lot of people who don't have people who are willing to say that to them. So I think in those cases, you need to set your own limits. You need to decide, this is the amount of time I'm going to dedicate to social media. And it's like an addiction. Like I constantly am reaching for my phone, scrolling through my phone. You just need to, once you realize that it's happening, hopefully that will help you be mindful of the fact that, all right, I need to be present and in the moment. I want to spend time with my family, or I want to read a book, or I want to get that project going. I mean, I found myself the other day scrolling through and all of a sudden 30 minutes of my life was gone.
Yeah.
And I wasn't doing anything productive. I was looking at videos that were completely not enriching my life, but they were time sucks. So I think you just have to realize that these things happen and then set limits for yourself that you know that you can keep.
Yeah. And I think that plays so well into the work-life balance conversation, because if you're really looking for the balance that, life encompasses, don't waste it on, mindlessly scrolling through things. And especially now where there is so much divisiveness on social media, it almost kind of, it brings up feelings and energies that you otherwise would not invite into your, daily space, especially when you're engaging with your children. It's like when they are putting on their shoes and you're all of a sudden now reading or, consuming something ugly, you've brought that into the space that you're sharing with your child, and they might not even know the shift that just occurred, while they were putting on their shoes. So I think it's really important how you were saying, like, it's another place to inventory. How am I spending my time? If that time is being spent on social media, is it productive and is it limited? Because I think for a lot of us, the answer is no, it's not productive, and it's definitely not limited. So thank you for that insight. We did a podcast with Latinas in Medicine. You may know Narjas Duma. She was on. She's also a magnificent female empowerer. And we had two other women, a doctor from Puerto Rico and a doctor from here in Florida. And they were talking about feelings of, as they were kind of growing through their profession, feelings of being stigmatized. And that even, one of the doctors who had practiced now for 15 years, she was saying, for 15 years, I've been fighting. I continue to fight with everything that I do. I continue to fight to be equal. Have you experienced the same? And maybe you can tell us not only about an experience, but a takeaway on how to start shifts in the way women are perceived in professional settings.
First of all, I love Narjas Thuma. She's amazing. I could probably talk about this for days and days and days. Part of the reason I got involved in women in medicine and gender equity work was because a lot of the things that had happened to me, I started to realize had happened to others. There's two great examples off the top of my head. So the first one is when I was pregnant with my twins, a physician, a colleague came up to me, put his hands on my stomach and said, well, this wasn't supposed to happen. And I said, do you mean physiologically this wasn't supposed to happen? Biologically? Like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, were you expecting this? And keep in mind, this is not somebody I knew very well. And I said, well, if you're asking if my husband and I were trying to get pregnant, the answer is yes. If you're asking if we were expecting twins, the answer is no. But I wouldn't say this wasn't supposed to happen. And it was, I think he didn't really understand why I was so confused by his statement, because he thought he was being offhand and funny. And I was thinking that is a really strange way to congratulate someone on being pregnant with twins. Another time, you know, I was leading an initiative and I had come up with the idea, I'd done all of the work, we were ready to launch, and a senior male physician sat me down and said, listen, you know, I know you put a lot of work into this and it's great. And, you know, we're all really proud of what you've done, but we don't want you representing this initiative because we don't want just another pretty face out there. And I said, but this was my idea, my concept. I've literally done 95% of the work for it. How could I not be the person who is being represented? How could I not be the person who's speaking out about this? You want me to just pretend like I didn't do any of this work? And he said, no, you can put it on your CV, but we want these other people to be talking about it and going out and discussing it and amplifying it. And I said, well, that seems unfair. And he said, yeah, well, you know, we don't just want another pretty face out there. So, and in the moment, I didn't know what to say because I was young and I was confused and I thought maybe I'd done something wrong. And then I was talking to some colleagues and my mom, actually. My mom is not a confrontational person, but she stands up for herself. And she said to me, well, I hope you said something. I said, Mom, he was a leader in the field. What was I supposed to say? And she said, well, you could have said something like, well, it's my idea, so I'm going to go out and do it. Sorry. And I said, yeah, but I don't want to get fired. And, you know, they'd already made their decision and they're way above my head. And so I just realized that these types of things, they keep happening and they keep happening. I've had people tell me the work that I'm doing is a waste of time. I've had people tell me that the work I'm doing isn't going to advance my career. And I've basically had people tell me, well, we've already achieved gender equity in medicine. Why on earth are you spending so much time doing this? What a waste of your career. And, you know, to those people now, I'm a little bit more confident in my responses, and I'll throw out a statistic at them and say, well, women still make 80% of what men make in the same position doing the same work. So I don't think we've achieved equity. Or I'll say, yeah, you can say that to me once you've been harassed as much as your female colleagues have been harassed in person and online. You know, so I have more ways to respond, usually in a very constructive and polite way, but it can be exhausting. I mean, even my own family has said to me, you know, why are you taking up this fight? This isn't your fight to take up. And I said, well, if it's not my fight, then whose is it? You know, if we don't continue striving to be better, if we don't continue striving to achieve equity in healthcare, then no one's going to do it. So when our kids are old enough to either go into medicine or not go into medicine, I don't want them fighting the same battles that women before us have fought and women are fighting now.
Yeah, I think that's so well said. You know, you think about the people who believe that it's over, believe that, you know, things are balanced and equal, and, you know, then you cross-check it against statements like this wasn't supposed to happen, you know, touching your belly. It's just kind of like, when did someone tell you that that's okay to do and to say? You know, I'm the only, as far as I know, I'm the only female owner of a medical education company in oncology. And I remember early on, you know, a few years back, we're the largest provider of ASCO education outside of ASCO, and we were running this ASCO program, summer program, and an older doctor, gentleman doctor, came to me and he said, "Oh, I have a problem with X." And I said, "Okay, let's try to work on it." And he wasn't satisfied with the answer, and he says, "Can you connect me like with your boss, with your manager, because I'm not satisfied with that." And I said, "Oh, I am the boss." And he said, "Okay, well, just give me the email to the owner of the company, because I'd like to be able to let him know that this is unacceptable." And I said, "Oh, well, maybe I wasn't clear. I'm not just the boss, but I am the owner of the company." And two things he said to me that kind of stuck with me from a female entrepreneur perspective was, like, one, he didn't feel that he caught himself as he was talking about being a woman, but then he said, "Well, I don't think you're old enough to have, the ability to design programs to teach doctors about this and that." And he said, "And also, you're not a doctor." And I thought to myself, I don't know when it became okay for someone to start disqualifying you on things that, went against the things that you were able to achieve. And I feel so much women, Narja said, and I loved it, she said, women are taxed. We're taxed when we're pregnant. We're taxed when we've got a sick kid at home that we've got to take care of. We're taxed when we have to leave by 6:30 p.m. or not get on a 7 o'clock call because we've got family responsibilities. And it's like the word taxed really resonated with me, because that's how it feels. It feels like if we start with $1, all of a sudden people start chipping away from that dollar, these taxes that are based on your gender. And I wonder if you would agree with that kind of tax analogy, and maybe talk to what we could do, not just to say what we feel in the moment, but to get involved in things that kind of remove those taxes, which are really unfair for us to have to pay.
You're absolutely right. So there's actually a phenomenon called the minority tax, and then a phenomenon called the women's tax, the mom tax. There's a very big, not a big, but there's a body of work discussing these taxes that women, and especially women with intersectionality, really face, because they get a double hit. And you're absolutely right. My husband and I joke about this all the time, where he can say no and not be penalized. If I say no, it's seen on me as not being a team player, or oh, she's a mom, or oh, she has 3 young kids at home, so that's why she can't do this. And so it's seen as a negative. While when he says no, people just say, okay. So it's a very different, and for example, I've been asked to do things before, and I have a very tough time saying no anyway, because I'm a people pleaser and I want everyone to be happy, which is something I'm working on. I'm working on learning how to curate my no and say no better. But I think that you're absolutely right, and Nargis has, hit the nail on the head. We do get taxed, and there have been meetings before where I've said I can't be at that meeting, I don't have childcare. Or especially during COVID, I've had a lot of conference calls and meetings where all 3 of my children have been sitting on my lap while I've been leading a lecture. My daughter has been with me on almost every lecture I've given in the last 6 months. She's made her presence known in some way. And I think my hope is that COVID is starting to let people see the real, challenges that working parents face and working moms face. But I worry that the gender equity strides that we've made prior to this pandemic are going to fall by the wayside, and we're going to end up with an even worse gender gap. And there's been a lot of papers that have come out about it over the last several months, just talking about how these taxes that you're talking about are going to get even worse, because kids are home doing virtual learning. Parents just can't, you have one computer in your house. If you need it for a Zoom meeting and your daughter needs it for, her 5th grade education, what are you going to do? It's just the challenges and struggles that we face. I think it's taxed differently, and I don't know if there's a good solution. I think that the challenge is you need to be able to say no, but you can't impact how the other person is going to view you. So the thing that I found that's really helpful is having allies. So for example, when I can't do something, oftentimes I'll if there's a friend or a colleague who's in it, I'll text them and say, hey, I can't do this because I've got to pick up my daughter from school. And so I will say I can't do it. And then my ally will say, yeah, I can't do it either. Let's find a different time. So that's one way to kind of, if you have allies in the meeting or in whatever it is, you can try to band together so that it's not just you. So that helps. It's silly and frustrating that we have to think about these strategies, but sometimes that's just what we have to do. I was talking to the director of oncology the other day. He is a huge advocate for just women in general, and he's sponsored and mentored me so much, even in the very short time I've been at the University of Illinois. And I was telling him something, and I said, you know, I want to send this email, but I want to send it in a way where I'm not offending this person. And he responded, he said, I am so sorry that you have to think of all of these things when you're writing an email. He said, these are things that I don't have to think about. When I just write the email, I send it, and I don't worry about these things. He said, but the fact that you have to think of all of these different potential outcomes and all of these different possible responses, mainly because you're a woman and you need to phrase it in a way that's seen as non-threatening, but also authoritative. You need to show that you're a leader, but also that you're a team player. He said, these are things that I don't have to worry about. And he said, I'm so sorry that you have to do this. And it's true. I mean, it takes me much longer to navigate some things than it would my male colleagues, because I'm literally thinking of every possible scenario. If I do this, is someone going to feel like I'm trying to one up them? If I tell someone that I got this award or that I published this paper, are they going to think I'm bragging? Or are they going to think that I'm showing off? Are they going to think that, oh, that's just her being her? Women are often classified in very different ways than men. The adjectives we use to describe men and women leaders are very different. Yeah. There was a study came out looking at entrepreneurs and how women and men were described the same but different. So men were found to be young and promising, and women were young but inexperienced. So the exact same words were being utilized to describe men and women, but with completely different context. For men, it was seen as a positive. For women, it was seen as a negative. So I think it's exhausting. It can get really, really tiring. And when you get to that point where your brain is just tired, that's when I really lean on my friends, my family. There are other women doing this work across the country who I will text and say, oh my gosh, how do you manage this? How do you push this rock uphill while hundreds of people are sitting on the rock and pushing it back down at you? You know, what do you do to keep your mental strength? And those are times where I just take a break. I put my phone down. I, you know, spend time with my family, and I say, the world doesn't need me right now. My family needs me right now. And I'd much rather be focusing on something that's good for me and my mental health and my family, as opposed to trying to solve the world's problems in this moment.
And, you know, part of what you're saying is just kind of speaks to that this is a marathon, and it's not that any of us are running it alone. And I think those two kind of understandings of what we as women who are not just leaders, but are in positions where we can help promote and empower upcoming women leaders, we've got to keep reminding ourselves of that. Otherwise, it gets very overwhelming and discouraging, because, you know, you do take 2 steps forward and 10 steps back. And then you say, you know, did I really accomplish anything today? But the reality is we are accomplishing, you know, each time we have a conversation like this, we're accomplishing something where someone listening can say, wow, I didn't think of it that particular way. You know, Doc, as you were talking about having that communication exchange with your director, I was thinking, I turned 44 this year. I either turned 43 or 44 this year. COVID's made me forget everything, which probably my age is a good thing. But, you know, I feel like I've come to a place. I've got a 17-year-old and a 6-year-old. I am in a place in my career where I'm happy. I mean, I truly can say I'm happy. And I think so much less about what other people think of me than I did in my 20s, my 30s, probably even when I turned 40, because 40 was that like who am I? You know, like, have I gotten everything that I wanted? And I feel like as 40 turned into 41 and 42 and then COVID and all this stuff, girl, now I'm like, I don't even care. I don't even, I will send that email and not double check in my mind all the ways that I could be doing it wrong. I will have those conversations where I'll say no, and I won't qualify it. I won't say no because I had planned to do something with Isaac or I had planned to take a nice long bath. I'll just say no, not available. And I feel so many times that what we fight for, and I really want to get your opinion on this, what we fight for is equality. What we fight for is equity, but we don't always act like we've earned it. We still are trying to justify why we should be treated as an equal. And I feel in this season of my life, I've moved on from that, like, let me tell you, let me show you who I am and why I'm good and why I'm better in this particular thing. And now I just say, if you don't see that at face value from us working together or from my achievements or from my spirit, my heart, then I kind of don't feel like I need to prove it to you. So I wonder what you feel about that, and if you think that women do ourselves a disservice by continuing to qualify our no's, or make excuses for the whys as we go on.
So I 100% agree with you. I think the challenge that, because I feel the same way, and I spent a very long time doing the exact same thing. I think the challenge that happens specifically in healthcare, especially in academic institutions, is the women who tend to do that are the ones who don't advance. And so the challenge is finding that balance of showing that you're an authority, having a leadership position. But the problem is the people who are making the decisions in your career are still people who feel that way. And so when I spent a year doing just that, and I realized that I was almost doing myself a disservice in certain scenarios. With certain scenarios, absolutely. I've learned I don't say sorry as much. I think it's you shouldn't be apologizing for everything. A better way is every time I want to say sorry to something, I now replace it with thank you for understanding. So that completely changed the way that I respond to emails. Like if I'm running a few minutes late, I'll say thank you for understanding and being patient with my running 5 minutes late. So I think that that is something in my mindset that I've changed. But I think especially in academic medicine, we read so many stories, and it's happened to me where I was doing just that, and I was leading like a man. And the problem that occurs is when women enact these kind of autocratic ways of leading, they are dinged. And until it changes at the top. So for you, you run your own business, you run your own company, so you're not reporting to anyone. So you can do that. And if you don't want to work with a certain company, then if they're not going to treat you with respect, then you have the ability to do that. The problem in medicine, especially in academic medicine, is that hierarchy still exists.
Yes.
So we're trying to dismantle this hierarchy or replace it with a more equitable system and structure. But in order for us to actually be able to do that, one, it takes decades. And there are women in medicine who have been working on this for decades, and they've moved the needle quite a bit, but we're still seeing the leadership structures at many of these institutions are homogenous. And we're not seeing the women advance because either they've taken the tact of, well, I deserve to be here, which they do, and they talk the way that they absolutely should be talking, but because of that, they're not given the opportunities they should be given. Things are withheld from them. They are penalized. They are punished. They are fired. It happens all the time. I could give you off the back of my mind, I could give you like 50 examples of women who were either penalized, they didn't get their promotion, they were dinged because someone in leadership thought they were too ambitious or thought that they were too goal driven or goal oriented, which are all things that you would want from your leaders. We are seeing women in academic medicine especially leave in droves. I was very close to leaving academic medicine because I felt that pushback. Not only did I feel it, it wasn't just subtle, it was overt, where I was being told things that I was doing were not okay because I was too young to be so ambitious. I was too young to be expecting to be able to lead. And my response was, I expect people even younger than me to be leading. I take advice and mentorship from medical students who teach me about the new technologies that are out there that I don't know about. I have a med student who works with me on my social media and who has improved my social media extensively over the last 5 years. So I think that this old mindset really exists in academic medicine. And so I absolutely agree, women should not be qualifying, they should not be justifying. The challenge occurs because the people who make the decisions, especially in academic medicine, expect that. Until we change the system, if we try to continue to behave the way that is equitable without an equitable system, we're just going to be shooting ourselves in the foot. So I think it's finding a balance where I lead, and I still lead with authority. And like my Women in Medicine Summit, I interact very differently with that group of individuals than I do with the individuals in my institution. And then I do with individuals on social media. It's almost like, so I'm a pretty transparent person. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'm very open and honest about everything. But I think what I've learned over the last 5 years is that the way I am strategic about how I lead, it needs to be in line with the people who are above me. Because if there are people above me and I am behaving in a way that they do not see is in line with the way that they think things should be, then they're not going to help me and I won't be able to achieve my goals. So my hope is that women, especially in academic medicine, but really women all over, are able to, as exhausting as it is, find the strategies that you need to have to be successful within the realm that you're in. And then when you get to a point where you can make those changes, then you make them and you remember the steps that it took you to get to where you are. And you remember, this was not okay. This was not okay. I don't want to be that type of leader. And then you advance the people who you think deserve to be advanced, whether your other colleagues think they are too ambitious or not. I think that is where the struggle lies. So I don't think that women should be apologizing or justifying things, but I do think they need to be strategic in how they navigate things until we get to a point where things are more equitable and we don't have to be as strategic about it in order to be successful in this moment in time.
I think that that's such great advice, and it's such great advice from the position that you're in, where you are kind of living and working within the structure. And one, two things I wrote down, it's almost like it's political and relational at once. It is strategic. And, I love that you brought it full circle, saying not only do we need to almost break that cycle, but then we have to redefine it once we're in those seats. Because it is easy to forget. And once we are in the seats of leadership where the structure, is very much where, you don't respect women who kind of stand out and say, no, this is me, this is the way I'm going to do things. Don't forget that was once you at the bottom trying to climb to say, but this isn't right. So I definitely appreciate, and in the position that I'm in, I can appreciate it also from a visual perspective, because I'm constantly engaging in that structure of inviting someone to speak and then seeing if they can't, who are they recommending and why. And sometimes it makes me scratch my head, because I think, I'm not sure that would have been like my natural next step, but in the structure of things in academia, there's that pecking order, and, you very much have to learn to operate within it. So let's shift to, you did a TED talk on this gender moonshot. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I watched it in preparation for this this podcast, we're going to link in the information so that people can watch it themselves. I thought it was fantastic. What gave you the inspiration, the courage, and kind of the structure on how you made that presentation? And do you still believe in, you know, the things that you were kind of putting forward as the importance in gender equality going forward?
So the Gender Moonshot kind of came about through my work through the Women in Medicine Summit. And when I kind of came up with the idea a couple years ago, it was something where I thought we needed to have a broad, big initiative to really move the needle. Now, obviously, since that time, we've been hit with a global pandemic and things have changed. We're in a different world now than we were a year ago. So I do fully believe that the Gender Moonshot is necessary. The main point of the Gender Moonshot is approaching gender equity in a scientific manner. So there have been women for decades, as I said, who have been doing phenomenal work in this space. And I'm young. I've just started doing this work over the last couple of years. So I've been reading and reading and reading. And I think that the most important thing to take away from it is we need to approach this almost like a medical problem, like a medical illness. Yeah. And when we approach the medical illness, first we do a lot of research on the problem, right? We look at the disease, the disorder, whatever it is, and we figure out how we're going to diagnose it. Then the next thing we do is we figure out what interventions, what treatments we need to do. And then we implement those treatments. And that's how we approach medical disease as physicians. And so the concept behind the Gender Moonshot is approaching it in the same way. There are so many papers and publications and books that have been written about gender inequity that exists, not only in healthcare, but as a nation. And the next step is not just studying what we know the problems are. While that is important information to have and important to continue to contribute to, we're at a point now where we need solutions. And I think, you know, people like Melinda Gates are doing phenomenal work in this space at a global level. They have grants that they're offering. They have initiatives that they're starting. So I think that the Global Moonshot is bigger than just one person, than one initiative. I think it really encompasses all of the amazing things that are happening across the country in the gender equity space. My original plan was for the Gender Moonshot to be something that encompassed everything else, but it's just not possible. It's just too big of an undertaking for one group or one organization to take on. So I think that the real purpose of the Moonshot at this point, I put that out there because I wanted the people who were kind of doing all of the work in silos to think about it in a bigger way, getting together and doing things as a collaborative, using the work that people in California are doing with the work of the people in Iowa. And since we initially announced the Moonshot, there have been several initiatives that have been launched that are doing just that, where they are bringing together, there's an equity collaborative that's been formed. There's, you know, obviously Time's Up Healthcare has formed. There are all of these amazing initiatives. And one thing that I'm so excited to see, I don't think I had anything to do with this. This happened before my time. But the thing that is so exciting to see is how they are all working together. Yeah. They are amplifying each other. And you see it on social media, you see it in the news, you're seeing that there's a lot of crossover between the people who are working in one initiative versus another, and they're sharing data. It's not a competition, it's a collaboration. Mm-hmm. And that is, you know, the Gender Moonshot, it's not really an initiative. I think it's almost more of a way of thinking. So you think of all of these collaboratives, all of these initiatives as something where everyone is working together to move the needle forward. And I think that's really what the concept of the Gender Moonshot is. It doesn't have to be, it's not like the Cancer Moonshot where it's research looking at just one aspect or one disease. It's looking at all of the gender inequity research and work that's out there and now coming up with strategic solutions. Dr. Julie Silver is a pioneer and a force to be reckoned with in the gender equity space. She has launched many, many initiatives, from the Need Her Science campaign to the She Leads Healthcare. I'm actually, hold on, I'm gonna pull something up for you. She, this month, she launched the Her Time Is Now campaign. So I don't know if you can see that, but this is, there's masks that are gonna be all over social media and t-shirts and things. So she is brilliant in the way that she brings people from across the country and really across the world together to move the needle in gender equity. And I think the types of work that she is doing, and other physicians like her, is really what we need to achieve this gender moonshot, to achieve this overarching theme of gender equity in healthcare and eventually in the nation.
Yeah. And that it's so interesting because that's how women behave, right? Like that's who we are. We are the sum of the group of our girlfriends, our sisters, you know, like we are always looking for connection, relationships, for everything from PTA bake sales all the way to gender moonshots. It's like, that's what we do. We do that well. And when we're supported by others, it causes this concept of work life to be shared. It's not all on our shoulders, because it can't be all on our shoulders, because as women, we carry everything personally on our shoulders: our husband, our families, our children, our work, our spirituality. All of these different things are things we already carry. So it's really beautiful to see how, you know, as we're moving forward as a group, we're moving forward where we know that we are supported by others. And a big part of that is being supported by people like your director, that stops to say, oh, wait a second, this is real, and how can I help? Not how can I tear it down and say, oh no, it's in your head, or no, that's just, you know, what people are telling, it's a narrative. No, that's real. So how can I help? And I love that whole, you know, he for she movement. Well, in these last few minutes, I kind of want to get a little bit personal with you. You know, we're people that work in oncology, and, you know, I did an interview with a doctor who wrote a book on dying well and what that all encompasses. And a huge part, and I interviewed Lily Shockney for a talk on, you know, end of life issues. And as we think about, you know, I still, even though my 17-year-old would disagree, we're still young women. And so when we think about our life, and as you're thinking about your life and your work, not only the work in the clinic, but the work that you're doing here, when you shift to think about legacy, what are one or two things that you want the Shikha Jain story to include as your kids grow up and start telling it to others?
So I think when I think about my legacy, I think there's a couple of things. So obviously, first and foremost, I want my kids to be happy, healthy, and good people. That to me is, I think, any parent's dream, that they want to raise good children, which again, I can't take credit for my kids being good kids. I have a huge support system, and I think they're a big part of the reason my kids are turning out okay.
Yeah.
So I think that is my number one. My second thing is, I would love, my dad being a surgeon, I used to see the impact he had on his patients' lives. And for me, that is so important. Especially as oncologists, we are privy to some of the most personal and intimate parts of our patients' lives. And I think that is a very great privilege, and I'm honored to be able to do that. I have patients who I've taken care of for 5 years who tell me that you know, I changed their lives. I have patients who have passed away, and their families reach out to me and say, thank you for what you've done. I think for me, you know, I tell my trainees that the words that you use and the relationships you have with your patients, you may forget them, but as their oncologist, they will remember you for the rest of their lives, and their families will remember the words that you used. So I think that is a really powerful responsibility. And I'm very fortunate and grateful that I have the opportunity in this lifetime to do that for my patients and to be that for my patients. And then the third thing for me, I want people to think of me as someone who left the world better than it was when I came in, whether it's small little things that I did, maybe just by creating the summit and having it as a resource for women in medicine, just something, whether, you know, it improved one person's life. I want one person to think that I left the world a better place than it was when I came into it, even if it was in a very small way. I hope that is how people remember me one day, because I mean, we can't ask for anything more than that. Being a good person, doing what we think is right, and trying to make the world a better place, because we're all in this together. We're living in the same world, and you only get one shot at this. So I would like my shot to result in something positive coming out of it.
Well, it already is. I can tell you, being a woman who follows you on social, who sticks close to the things that are important to you, and seeing kind of how you use your voice for change and for empowerment. You had mentioned earlier in the interview, you know, that others may say it's a waste of time, or that we've already achieved what you're seeking to fight for. It's absolutely not a waste of time. You and I both know that. It's an opportunity to lift up the next generation. In fact, when we did the Latinas in Medicine, Nargis started the interview after the other two women, Dr. Cruz and Dr. Gaqueta, were telling their stories of, you know, 15, 20 years in practice. And Nargis said, I'm here because you all broke a lot of barriers, like your fights, you know, the things that you have put your life and your commitment into matter to me. Like I'm evidence that it's been working. So it really was something that made me feel like, yeah, we are doing things that are important, and you definitely are. And I was very kind of sad to hear that you ever got to the place where you were close to leaving. You can't leave. You can't leave in a million ways. You can't leave. You have to be here. You make the rest of us better. You challenge us to do things that are outside the box. And I can't wait to see, if you've done this much in this short time, I can't wait to see what you do with the rest of the time that you're given. So Dr. Jain, thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for all the work that you do. We pray for you and your family to be safe at this time, and to continue to do the wonderful things that you set out to do every day in practice.
Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for creating this wonderful series of important interviews with phenomenal physicians. I think that what you do is extremely important as well. So thank you for providing me the opportunity to talk with you today.
Wonderful. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.